Excuse me, Mr. DJ.
Hey, check this out. We got a great show coming your way.
From the ECSI Sports Studios, it's the Midday Market Report with Jeff Dawson.
ECSI fans, you want to revolutionize your sports investing habits? Allow me to tell you about WagerWire. WagerWire is an app that helps you become a superior bettor by allowing you to sync all of your sports books and track all of your bets in one place. See your current action, your betting history, and stats. You can also sign up for sports books and collect bonus offers. Follow them at WagerWire on X, as they're the best account on the platform. Head to the App Store or Play Store now and search WagerWire to download the app.
Good evening, kind of, sort of. Welcome to the ECSI Closing Bell, the NCAA NFL show with my good friend and colleague, Ron Marmalefsky. It's an amazing way to end the week here at ECSI. Blessed and honored to have him here on the first Friday of November 3rd to be exact. Shout out to the gentleman behind the glass, Joseph Shea, Evan Lewis, Olu, Cade Horton, and of course, Bennett. Our proud sponsor and partnership with WagerWire. If you have not downloaded the app, please run over to Google Play or wherever you download your apps. Download it. It's free. ECSI will be doing a lot of editorials, tutorials in the up and coming days, weeks, months, and hopefully years on ROI, on how to sync your bets to numerous sports books all across the state that are up and running for you. Window shopping, as we like to say here. Why buy a minus 125 when you can go next door and get a minus 115? Those 10 cents, those 7-8 cents in the marathon approach, day to day, week to week, month to month, year to year, all add up. Just ask the gentleman that is our star of the show, Ron. So tonight, shout out to Mr. Russell Saylor, already behind the glass chatting with Ron. We're going to go over the trade deadline. We're going to talk some great college football. I'm going to ask Ron, with all the injuries in the NFL, how it affects his plays. I'm assuming there's not a lot of plays due to the new quarterbacks or the unknowns. We have a couple unknowns, I think, this week here. One for Arizona, the one in Vegas, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So without further ado, let's bring him in, the star of this show, Mr. Ron himself.
Good afternoon, and it's a glorious afternoon, another sunny afternoon in Southern California. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I absolutely, I say this the start of every show that I have you. I love this spot here. It ends the week for ECSI. Tuesday, Thursday, Fridays, very, very busy here on our channels. But this brings closure, and it brings another look that we don't do all week. The data, the analytics, able to pick the mad scientist, as I like to call you, the genius behind the decades of notebooks and data, and really see it from your perspective.
Well, that's kind of you to say that. I will say the methodology, the approach that I've taken year in and year out, it's still working. The marriage of power ratings, the marriage of matchup data, the marriage of situational data, and just grinding it out, going through the box scores. Couldn't be happier with how everything's been going this season, that's for sure. But you're only as good as your last week. So doesn't guarantee anything for this weekend or any of the weekends to come. So we just keep at it. I'm going to start.
I love to start college, but I'm going to backtrack here. We had the trade deadline on Halloween in the NFL. We talked last week about two of the big names in Washington, Mr. Sweat, and of course, Mr. Chase Young, that were potentially going to be on the move and that were on the move. I thought the Bills made a hell of a trade with Green Bay for a cornerback. Overall, give me your assessment. Talk was cheap in Denver as Judy, Cortland Sutton all stay. Not a lot of big moves, but the one that we will get into was the move that Sam Fran made. But overall, your assessment of the trade deadline.
It was slow in some people's eyes, and that some of the big names didn't move. Some of the teams people thought were going to be sellers, like Denver, turned out not to be a seller. Washington turned out to be the biggest seller in terms of giving up their two stalwarts along the defensive line. San Francisco, yes, they moved in and got one of them. Little surprised that Chicago went after the other one because Chicago's in rebuilding mode. But if they can sign him, and Chicago, I believe, has $110 million under the cap for next year. So they've got money to spend and a couple of first-round draft choices. And the guy they signed, Sweat, he's not that old. So just his second contract. So that should work out. Maybe Chicago has a plan in mind. But overall, just a handful of changes here and there. I may use my allotted time at the end of the show to give you some adjustments that I made based on the trade deadline news.
I talked to you behind the stage. I kind of, as all my 1,200 plus shows on YouTube, not one has ever been scripted or one will be scripted. I gave you one of the topics I want to talk about, and that was San Francisco. For people that don't understand, Mr. Shanahan almost runs a Bill Belichick approach, as in it's the system. And we win ball games by winning the turnover battle. We win ball games by playing real hard defense, and we run the crap out of the ball. What did he do? Well, he said, you know what? We've lost 3 in a row. We're coming into a bye week. Let's go get Chase Young. Let's reunite him with Nick Bosa. Both played at Ohio State. Let's give him 10 days to get acclimated. And they traveled to Jacksonville next week, only 2.5-point favorites in the look-ahead line. I thought a brilliant move by the 49ers.
Yeah. The 49ers have long valued defensive linemen, and that's the area that they think drives their franchise. They have 4 or 5, I don't know how many first-round defensive linemen on that unit, and Chase Young adds to the mix. This is the way they build their team. They don't have a great secondary. They lost Jimmy Ward in the offseason. A bunch of youngsters that are playing fundamentally sound ball. They've had some very good defensive coordinators that have become head coaches over the years. They hope they have another one right now. That remains to be seen. But if their defensive line is so locked and loaded, it takes the pressure off of their secondary. With Trent Williams coming back probably next week at left tackle, with what's his name? Deebo Samuel coming back. He said he's definitely coming back. If the offense gets up to par, and if Chase Young can stay healthy, which is one of the things that he's had an issue with, then yes, San Francisco will reassert itself at the top of the food chain in the NFL.
I could have saved a lot of headaches and hassles for the 702 area code and the Las Vegas Raiders. I live 45 minutes south of Gillette Stadium. I lived the Josh McDaniels circle for a long, long time. The Denver Broncos comes back, and not a lot of people know this, Ron, but was on a plane heading to Indy to take that job when Mr. Kraft intervened and says, hey, get your butt back here. We want you back here. And the truth to that story is that he caught rumors that it was 50-50 that Andrew Luck was going to retire, and he did retire. So he comes back here, he waits out, and the Raiders swoop in and grab what they thought there was the knight in shining armor. They bring him over. Disappointment last year. They bring in Jimmy G. They got a disgruntled Devontae Adams. Josh Jacobs waiting in his car outside the stadium during practice sessions, waiting for a contract. A total dumpster fire. And finally, they pulled the plug on it. Thoughts there?
As my longtime friend and one of the trio of the Inside Blitz show said, Ted Sobel, about an hour ago on our show, there's fun back in the Las Vegas Raiders locker room. I mentioned that Devontae Adams was shooting free throws and schooling people on the basketball net that they brought in there. It just didn't work out for Josh McDaniels as a head coach. And, maybe in retrospect, he took the job that maybe he shouldn't have because the Raiders were dysfunctional. They haven't drafted well in many a year. I outlined a 3-step process, which what they have to do if they want to become relevant again. If they don't do that, that's a problem. Antonio Pierce will give them kind of a spike. They're going to play hard for them. They may play beyond their means for a week or two, or maybe even a little bit longer, like what happened a couple of years ago with them and happens with other teams. But overall, they need a new direction. They need a very strong GM to drive this show. And they need to sign quality free agents and draft quality players that have more than just one asset. They have to be able to see the big picture. They have to be smarter players, and they have to be better draft choices. So the Raiders are probably out of the playoff picture. They'll play hard, and they'll give some teams a battle, and we'll just see how it goes for the rest of the year.
Your assumption, I know nothing. I think we've seen the last of Jimmy G. I don't know what his contract looks like. Aiden O'Connell will be the starting quarterback moving forward. They did try to move the slot receiver there, Mr. Renfro, which I'm surprised they had no takers there. Is this an audition for O'Connell? Do you think this is a quarterback that could actually be their future, or does this, if they keep losing, puts them into the quarterback carousel in the draft?
Probably 30% audition, 70%, depending on their record, they're going to go get a quarterback in the first round because there may be 5 of them in the first round. There's a need for more quarterbacks in the NFL. There are some excellent quarterbacks, but there's not 32 starting quarterbacks right now in the NFL. The NFL needs the college draft to replenish that. And O'Connell, he's an accurate quarterback. He's pretty much, based on my analysis in college, more of a statue type quarterback. He reminds me very slightly, I mentioned this an hour ago, of Drew Bledsoe in terms of the fact that he could do some wonderful things. He may pass this edition and cause the Raiders to think twice about a quarterback in the next round. So, yeah, I think Jimmy G is out, basically, because Jimmy G would only be a Band-Aid the rest of the way. They've seen enough from him. He doesn't stay healthy enough. So let's see what O'Connell can do.
Tuesday, the committee had their first top 25 with, of course, their final 4 assessments. I guess by default, and I'm saying this because I don't believe Ohio State's the best team in the country, I will put them up against Oregon in 2 seconds in a neutral field, and I would put my money on Oregon. But Oregon, Georgia, Michigan, and Florida State rounding out the Final 4. The Florida State team I have not given enough credit to, but looking forward, I don't think there's anyone left that can actually beat them. So they're going to be that one team that most likely is going to be in the Final 4. Assessment of the Final 4 after week 1, and what is wrong? Do you have Ohio State currently as the number 1 team in the country?
Okay, well, first of all, whatever the first Final 4 rankings come out, it generally means nothing. I mean, there's a lot of football to be played, and you've got Ohio State, Michigan, you got Michigan, Penn State, you've got Oklahoma playing Oklahoma State this week, you got Kansas State against Texas, you've got Washington, Oregon playing a whole bunch of tough opponents. You're right about Florida State. Their schedule means that they're in if they sweep the board, but they may be out if they're 12-1 because their strength of schedule is so low. The only thing that the first run through gives me information about is who the group of 5 team is going to be, because it's harder for the group of 5 teams to move up and down. So I kind of look at that. Ohio State's my second rated power rating team behind Michigan. Georgia is third. They would be tied for second, but Brock Bowers cost them in my eyes. So I would have Ohio State third. I would not have Florida State fourth. I would have Oregon fourth over Florida State. But we understand that the committee values undefeated teams. It's just power rating wise, even though Florida State's done some wonderful things, they're not one of the top 4 teams in the nation. Oregon would be favored over Florida State.
We do have some, I don't want to say trap games. We have some very interesting games before I get over to the Pac-12. We talked on Friday, and I saw a big move on Jaden Daniels' Heisman Trophy odds. And their 2 losses, LSU, opening day against Florida State, and then when they gave up 55 at Ole Miss, only 3-point underdogs to a 1-loss Alabama team. Now, about 3.5 weeks ago, ECSI gave out Alabama plus 2,000 as they were beating Arkansas. We got the number on at DraftKings. 2 things here. I'm shocked. I'm surprised Alabama's only laying 3 here. It almost smells like a trap where I said today I thought the whole world was on Alabama. I mean, who wouldn't want Alabama -3? They do have 1 loss this year at home to Texas. I don't remember the last. It's been a while since the Nick Saban team has lost 2 games at Tuscaloosa. Give the edge, obviously, defensively to Alabama, but offensively to LSU. How do you see this game going?
Yeah, this is an interesting game for a number of reasons. As usual, they each have a week off to try to fix some of the areas. LSU has to fix a lot defensively, while Alabama has to fix up their pass protection, which has been kind of dismal this year. I've never seen them get sacked so much. Line is low to me. I would, by power rating alone, I would make it 5.5. 2 factors come into play here. Number one, can Alabama jumpstart the run game, which would be a huge edge against LSU? And number 2, can Alabama stop Daniels, who's the kind of quarterback that's hard to stop by any team, even though Alabama plays very sound fundamental football? Saban remembers these losses, and they lost, I believe, on a 2-point conversion last year, something like 32-31. So this is a big game for Saban. He generally extracts revenge. On the other hand, this has been a visitor series. LSU has no problem going in and have had success against Alabama, just like Alabama has had success at LSU. All those factors considered, I wouldn't be surprised at anything happening in this particular game. I understand why the line isn't 5.5. I still lean to Alabama with the revenge factor, and I expect that they'll have better pass protection.
I'm going to head out to the Pac-12. I smell rat here. Washington team we talked about a few weeks ago that played the game of the year against Oregon. We both know from the eye test that Oregon was the better team, but Washington found a way to hold on. Since then, the last 2 weeks, I like to say, been chewing their food, has kind of been playing a little grab ass here. Traveled to USC, a 2-loss USC team, lose. They get run over at Notre Dame, and then they come back and they get well spotted against Utah, no Cam Rising, and lose there. Hold on for their lives, 50-49 against Cal. Yet Washington only a 3-point favorite. An under over that started at 71 that is now 76.5 first one to 40 wins this game, Ron. Thoughts on that game?
I set this game, according to my power numbers, Washington -1.5. So the 3.5 and 4 when I first got a hold of it, was high in my eyes. And the rat that you saw was probably the rat that was outside my house when I was sending it away, because there is a rat in this particular instance, because matchup wise, in a little bit of surprise to me, USC has matchup analysis that cannot be ignored in this game. The underdog also in situational plays has nothing to do with the matchup. The underdog in the series has been plus over a 29 game sample size, 21-8 to the underdog. So you'd rather have points giving everything else. I do give USC a slightly better than average chance of winning this game straight up. I understand that Penix is going to hit 70% in this game. I think he's a fabulous quarterback. I also understand that USC's quarterback is going to have a tremendous amount of success in this game as well. Both teams are loaded at wide receiver. Big edge for USC in the running game. Washington, they'll probably run well because USC doesn't defend the run well, but they don't have anywhere close to a superstar in that area. I think if they need to have run-pass balance, USC is the team most likely to have it. Disrespected underdog at home, I give USC the edge.
I wanted to give you a couple seconds to talk about that upstart Arizona team. You've been talking about them for a few weeks now. I was blindsided by this team. I don't know what to say other than wow. They just they've come out of nowhere. You talked about them on Friday's show. What are they drinking out in Tucson this year?
It pains me to say that I had to have Arizona last week with the odds against my alma mater, Oregon State. I played it. By the time the evening rolled on and I was definitely in the plus side, I was hoping to actually lose my play because I wanted. It's a weird dynamic when you want your alma mater to win, but it's going to cost you money. But I just think Arizona's playing better run defense than people think. They have run pass balance. They have they have a sound enough fundamentally in terms of their matchup analysis against Oregon State was strong. So they are probably going to be bowl eligible this year. They are going to deserve to be bowl eligible this year. Yet this is not the same matchup. They're at home against UCLA. And if you read the box scores, this is a tip for a lot of people. If you read the box scores, you know that UCLA's win over Colorado, 28-16, should have been somewhere along the lines of 45-10, if you could believe it. USC had double the yardage, 487, 242, if I remember correctly, double the yardage in that game. There were 4 turnovers in that game, all committed by UCLA. That, by my standards, is 7.5, 15 points that they gave away. They missed a very short field goal, the only team to miss a field goal in that game. UCLA dominated Colorado, so you get a little bit of a short line in this particular game. The line's correct. The line should not be 3. Actually, the line should be roughly 1.5 in that area, UCLA. But I think there's hidden value. I think UCLA, if they don't, they're not a good kicking team this year, so special teams could hurt them. But UCLA on paper, when they run the ball and when they run their offense, has a decided advantage in this game against Arizona. So I think this is a tougher spot for Arizona.
Mr. Russell Saylor wants to know, are you from Oregon or just went to college at Oregon State?
Born and raised in California. The only 4 years I was gone from, I'm born and raised in California, Los Angeles. The only 4 years that I was gone from Los Angeles was up into Corvallis, Oregon. So no, just happened to go to school there.
I'm going to bring up two games for you to analyze before we tiptoe over to the NFL. Possible two upsets or two good games. K-State travels to Texas, and Oklahoma travels to Oklahoma State. Now, an Oklahoma State team again started slow. Team Mullet. Oklahoma, on the other hand, got their pants pulled down at Kansas last week. So a good bounce back spot. Currently, right now, I'm seeing 6 at DraftKings, 5 at Circa, 5-point favorites at Oklahoma State with a 62, and Kansas State and Texas. I'm seeing it as low as 3.5 now. Texas favorite against Kansas State. Kelly Stewart is live in Texas at the game. She must be moving numbers on her alma mater with the Kansas State Wildcats here, who are also playing great ball as well.
Okay. I think it's a real asset to say you don't know how a game is going to go when you don't know how a game. I'm not going to invent anything. Kansas State and Texas, I have no idea what's going to happen. And I love that assessment. I can move on. I'm just going to enjoy that game as a fan. I do not have enough data points on Texas's new quarterback. I know he's 6'5". I know he won the last game. It was an easier opponent. Kansas State, like you said, is playing well. They might frustrate the defense of Texas, especially since they brought in a second quarterback that can run the ball, that can do some various things as well. I'm fascinated by that game, but I have no clue what's going to be happening. It's obviously a very important game. What do we have? We have 5 teams tied for the lead in the Big 12, thanks to Oklahoma's loss last week. And we have 2 teams 1 game out of the race. It's a 7-team race. And when Oklahoma and Texas lead the conference next year, it's going to get even crazier. And then you have that Oklahoma State game, the Bedouin game. I'll have more to say about that later. But I will say that Oklahoma State has found its quarterback. It's found its running back. This looks like a track meet game to me. I don't know if it's a bounce back situation for Oklahoma because of the way they lost and the way they played defense this year. So the numbers slightly lean to Oklahoma State without a good ROI number attached to it. I attach ROI to every play that I make. There is no real ROI involved, just a lean to Oklahoma State. I would not be surprised if Oklahoma State won straight up. But I also know that Oklahoma has played fairly well historically at Oklahoma State. So anything can happen, but I would definitely have a lean to Oklahoma State in the game.
That's where my eyes are there as well. And as you know, I could talk college with you till the cows come home, and we'd have our wives turning off the lights here, but I can't do that to you. So NFL, we talked backstage. We talked about the uncertainty of all the quarterbacks. There's a handful. Sounds like Deshaun Watson finally is going to give it a shot this week. It sounds like Kyler Murray's going to wait another week. We talked about Mr. O'Connell in the Vegas. Daniel Jones coming back for the Giants. Ritter got pulled out last week, and they're sticking with Taylor Heineke. And I know I'm missing a handful. The quarterback carousel week 9, how does that affect you, Ron?
I think you were right when you said this is a tread carefully week for me. It's not going to be a heavy volume week. And even if I did find 4 or 5 plays, we're talking 1 and 2 star plays. We're not talking 3-star and beyond plays. There's no game I see on the schedule that warrants a 3-star play in my eyes because of all this uncertainty. Probably 7 games are affected. I don't know about the Deshaun Watson, situation. Now, Joshua Dobbs, of course, is off of Arizona. And so you have a brand new rookie quarterback at Arizona. That's just a curious game to me. Watson is lucky to face a team that allows over 7 out of every 10 passes to be completed. Maybe that'll be good for his confidence. But I'm not crazy about the way Watson has played this year to begin with. So you're going to have to rely on Cleveland's defense if you want to back Cleveland And Cleveland's defense took a couple of hits the last 2 weeks, so they're not as good as they have been. Let's see, you got another game in there. Chicago, third game in a row with their quarterback taking over for Justin Fields. And this is going to be his toughest game because you have a veteran New Orleans team with Lattimore in the back end. And I think that's going to be an incredibly tough assignment for Bagent to decipher and to score a lot of points for the Bears. Vegas, of course, has O'Connell now at quarterback. Not a bad spot to go against the New York Giants, who will have Daniel Jones back at some sort of speed. I don't know whether Daniel Jones will run with the ball or not. You usually get a new coach spike, an interim coach spike, and they're going to like playing for an ex-player with the Raiders. I was telling my friends Chris and Ted on the show that prior to the McDaniels news, I had information, I had matchup analysis that favored the New York Giants. But with the coaching change, we don't know what the scheme and the playbook is going to look like. I'm going to have to back off on that game. So that goes back to your point of a tread careful game. Those are just three examples that I can think of. And there was another one, Minnesota, a huge difference in Minnesota. The bookmakers are saying it's going to be about an 8-point difference to bring in a quarterback that hasn't played versus an Atlanta team, a passive defense. I think it's an over adjustment, but how do we know for sure until we get some data points? And then the Rams may or may not have Matthew Stafford, and Stafford's not that healthy anyway.
We start the day at 9:30 a.m. East Coast time, 6:30 a.m. for you. Great game. Miami, Kansas City, and Frankfurt, Germany. The mindset, I think, for most people is Kansas City coming off a dreadful loss in Denver. They had won 6 in a row. They won't lose 2 in a row, obviously. They have Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid. They have Travis Kelce and the Swifties. And versus a Miami team that people see, well, when they play real competition, they don't do well. They went to Buffalo and got steamrolled. They went to Philly and got steamrolled. So now they're going to travel against an upset Kansas City team. My true number was a pick with a 49. The public's running hard to the window. Kansas City now 2 with a 50. I think Miami not only covers, but I think they went outright, Ron. Your thoughts?
My number would be less than 2.5 as well. I greatly appreciate daylight savings time. I get an hour, spring forward, fall back. So, because I have every intention of watching this game as a fan. And the fact that I don't have to wake up at 6 a.m. to do that, but I can wake up at the adjusted time of 6 a.m. is great. I don't have a feeling for this game. I pretty much want to watch it as a fan. You never know what happens on the plane ride, going to Germany, the young kids and stuff like that, the new environment. We don't have the situational advantages or the injury information that we had when Jacksonville played Buffalo, when we had a confluence. We had like 5-6 different things that pointed us directly to Jacksonville in that game against Buffalo. I see no edge for either team going to Germany. I see virtually no edge in the power ratings. Maybe +3 would be slightly tempting with Miami. But right now, as Miami is starting to get healthy defensively, it's still Pat Mahomes going against a Miami defense that isn't quite there yet, which is an advantage. For Miami to win, they can do what is their strength, and that's play keep away against Pat Mahomes. Denver played keep away against Pat Mahomes. Mahomes didn't get in rhythm because he never saw the ball in the third quarter last week against Denver. Miami has the run game and the run pass balance to do that as well. I look for a good game, but no edge for me.
I'll go to the game of the week for most people. Only 3 4:00 games. Actually, there's 2 games, 3 games of the week. We just talked about Miami, Kansas City. Let's go to Philadelphia as they host the Cowboys round 1. My true number was Philly -3 with a 46.5. The line's still at 3. I am seeing some 47s and 47.5. This one is to set the tone, plant the flag on the NFC East. I still think Philly's the better team on paper. Dallas defensively, Micah, I mean, are they going to raise havoc on Jalen Hurts? I don't think so. The Hurts to A.J. Brown combination has been the best combination in the last month, what A.J. Brown has done. They haven't even needed or leaned on Swift in a while. Big game from CeeDee Lamb last week as well. Thoughts on Dallas and Philadelphia round one, Ron?
Well, can you tell me which Dak is going to come through? Can you give me Monday's paper? Because on paper, I have only one matchup that favors one team or another, and it favors Dak Prescott as having good accuracy against Philly's pass defense. Now, Philly has added Tennessee's former safety, Kevin Bard, I think you say. I don't know how you pronounce quite his last name, but he is an experienced player, a guy who puts people in the right place, kind of a leader. He could really help Philly's secondary. Once again, Howie Roseman. You should just lose Howie Roseman's number because he's going to get good trade value. If that helps get Philly's defense into the swing of things, it negates what could be a Dallas advantage in terms of accuracy. With the 3 points, I would lean Dallas. And Dallas has played well at Philly. And obviously they play every single year there. So there's nothing new about that. And there are some people that I know that, and I'm not doubting them, that think that Jalen Hurts is still not quite 100% in terms of his running and his overall health. So my lean would be Dallas in this game.
And last but not least, a game that started last year that unfortunately we had the injury to Damar Hamlin and the game never happened. Buffalo travels to Cincinnati. And again, I like to stress this. We remember what we saw last. We saw a Cincinnati team coming off a bye. We saw a Joe Burrow not once, not twice, 3 times take the ball, run straight through the middle, looking for someone to tackle him, getting up, and he looked amazing. Burrow to Chase is back. It's a team ascending in the right direction. In comes Buffalo, a team that we don't know much about. When they're clicking and cooking with Crisco, they're a tough team to beat, but there's just been too many inconsistencies. My true number, honestly, was Buffalo -1. I'm looking at the spreadsheet. It's a pick and 46.5. Now as high as Cincinnati -2 and 50.5. I know most people will have Cincinnati money line, Cincinnati -1, 1.5, 2. I get it. I love what I saw, but something smells here. Something does. Buffalo as a dog. The number's not correct. I hope you steer me wrong.
Everything you said is true. But so I have to say something beyond that, I guess. But the thing of it is, nobody who does power ratings would have Cincinnati where they are. Cincinnati actually opened at +3 for a day or so, and then it came down to 2. No one would have that. And this is speaking from somebody who was ahead of the curve with Cincinnati. I firmly believe Cincinnati was going to beat San Francisco because of so many factors. And what you started out by saying with Burrow running the ball, I said about 5 weeks ago, I said on all the shows that I was on, we'll know when Burrow is back when he takes off and runs, because he had basically run for 4 yards the entire season until last week. And you saw right away that this was the old Joe Burrow. And I was ahead of the curve on that. And I was glad about that in terms of knowing that you had to throw out Joe Burrow's first 3 games. But there's no way that there's value anymore on Cincinnati. That was a 1-week value window period. Last year, you had maybe 2 or 3 weeks of value window period as Burrow was recovering from his appendectomy and so on. You only had 1 week now, and Cincinnati has already, their power number in a lot of people's eyes has been overcompensated. I also agree with you, though, that Cincinnati is a better team right now than Buffalo, even though the power ratings don't say that, because Buffalo is incomplete defensively. For Buffalo to win this game, they're going to have to outscore Cincinnati. And you know something? It's possible, because I think you're going to see the best of Josh Allen in this game. I don't think he's going to be passive. I think he's going to go all out. I think he's going to run. I think he's going to do all the things necessary to put a burden on Cincinnati's front four. And Cincinnati's front four, I would say, has been an average unit so far. So again, like Miami KC, I find this a fascinating game, not necessarily from a betting standpoint, but from a strategic standpoint. I'll love watching it.
Before I give you that 10-yard button hook for your closing thoughts, I'm a big Herbert fan. I talked about him in August. I put him in the top 3 or 4 quarterbacks. If it wasn't for the head coach, I think he would be an absolute elite. Chargers would be fighting with Kansas City for the top spot and definitely in the playoffs and in the MVP chase. An amazing first half from Herbert. It was great to see him back. I know that left hand with the splint is bothering him. Only a 2.5 with a 42.5 Monday. Now up to 3.5. A game the Chargers really need to get to 500. The Jets have knocked off the Bills at home. They have knocked off, which was an undefeated Eagles team. Do we put the Chargers on upset alert? Are we thinking that Zach Wilson and the defense will cause enough problems to actually beat Chargers, or was last week a stepping stone and moving in the right direction for the Chargers moving forward?
I made no adjustment to the Chargers after last week. They did what they needed to do. They beat a bad team. The Jets, you could argue, didn't do so well because they got gifted a win over the Giants. Yet with all that being said, a lot of us are surprised that the line crossed 3. The Jets have 2 situations, one which is a very average situation and one situation that I like that favors the Jets. I think I pretty much have no choice but to you give me 3.5 over the 3 points. I just have to go for the Jets. They haven't shown a shutdown defense like they did last year, but they're capable of doing that against the Chargers. Eckler is doing okay, but he hasn't excelled like he did in the previous game. Yes, Justin Herbert could get red hot in this particular game. I think the Jets will be able to run the ball better than they did against the Giants, and I think they could run the ball on the Chargers. I just think 3.5 points is too much. I'm not saying the Jets will win, but I wouldn't be surprised that the Jets would win. I just think 3.5 is too much. I could see this as anywhere from an upset to a 3-point loss. I think they twisted my arm a little bit in taking the Jets.
Yeah, my first number was right around that 23-20. Dicker the kicker from 47 and a walk-off from the Chargers.
Sure.
They are enticing you once that crosses to 3.5. I know the sharps will be on the Jets. Will definitely be an interesting game for sure. So much to talk about. We covered so much. I mean, Russell, Hector, Mike Dombrowski, everyone here. I can't thank you guys enough. But as we always finish here, I give you that nice little 10-yard button hook, and you can wrap us up with your closing thoughts.
Okay, I'm going to do the NFL one first. One for the NFL, one for the NCAA. So I'll do the good news first. In the NFL, I wrote an article about the trade deadline, and I just want to reiterate for your audience some of the things that I've considered based on the trades being made. I've adjusted Washington's power rating down 2 points. It's like Quester injuries, only these are like Quester season-ending injuries. You lost 2 of your best players on the defense, both on the defensive line. Whatever you have before, if you do power ratings, I've knocked them down 2 points. And I think that makes me think that down the road, maybe not with New England, but down the road, when whoever Washington plays that has a threat of an offense, I would go team total over against Washington's defense. So that's something I'm considering. I'm cautiously optimistic with the addition that Chicago made that they'll play a little bit better defensively. They're still going to be highly erratic offensively. I didn't say they were going to win any more games. I just think you might see a little bit better of a defensive effort. I downgrade Minnesota's downfield aerial attack if Joshua Dobbs takes the job after this week. However, his elusiveness is something that you have to factor in. He's going to be a different quarterback than Minnesota has had under Kirk Cousins. So when you scheme, when you do matchup analysis for Minnesota, take into account that you better do it differently. I'm downgrading the New York Giants defensively. Leonard Williams is a big loss, a lunch pail guy along the defensive line. I really like him. I like the addition for Seattle. I understand why the Giants had to let him go. They did it gracefully. They weren't going to re-sign him, but that's a loss. And I'm monitoring Buffalo on the defensive end with Rasul Douglas in tow. A necessary addition. I don't know how much he's worth. I guess we're going to start finding out when he plays Cincinnati. That's my NFL nugget. The sad news is we talked about Oklahoma State. This is it. The end of Bedlam. Oklahoma State rivalry is over. I hate it for college football. I absolutely hate it. In 3 weeks, we're going to see the last Apple Cup, perhaps, Washington and Washington State. We're also going to see Oregon and Oregon State not want to play each other again. In fact, Oregon wants to have the rivalry on their terms. They want home games. Oregon State is already livid again about what Oregon's been doing to the conference and everything else. These rivalries go back 100 and some years or whatever. Oregon State is one of the oldest rivalries ever played. Oklahoma State is just an emotional rivalry that we're going to not have because of changing conferences. As much as we love talking about college football, next year is going to be a double-edged sword for me. I just hate the fact that Oklahoma State goes away.
And it's funny, it didn't hit me till you started talking about that, and I kind of understood where you were heading. And I'll just say money, greed, and in today's society, there's talks amongst the ranks that, this is just going to now be almost like the G League in the NBA, where the college football is they're going to line them up and top 16 play. There'll be 2 or 3 power conferences. All of those rivalries are dead. And it's sad for us guys, especially that grew up with those rivalry games. And to the Gen Z, to the millennials, it's just another Saturday. But to us, it meant something. And I was doing a show earlier this week when we were bringing back the old time bowl games and what January 1st really was about. You get up early, you watched the parade, and then you had your early games. And then at 5:00, you had Keith Jackson and the Rose Bowl. And then you made sure at 8:00 you were ready for the Orange Bowl with Don Criqui. And we're going to miss those days. And I'm going to say hats off to myself, because I was going to ask the question out loud. Russell wanted to Lions at Chargers. I had Lions -1.5. So Jesus, at least I end the week on the plus side as well. So Ron, as always, I can't thank you enough.
Thank you for having me. I remember those days. January 1st, I would go with my dad to the Rose Bowl, which was generally what we called the USC Bowl because they were always in it. And then as I became a handicapper, I would handicap January 1st. We'd watch all the games. A group of us would go watch it. And that signified the end of the season. And we were done with college on January 1st. Now it goes on. You have some floater games and then the championship and a whole bunch of playoffs next year. I miss those days in a way. I miss having fewer bowl games, believe it or not.
Again, shout out to Hector Russell, Big City Mike, Billy Hewlin, Roll Tide. A lot of people watching the show. If you guys can do us a favor, retweet the show, tell some friends to come back here next Friday at 5 o'clock. Jump on over to East Coast Sports Investors YouTube Nation. Subscribe. It's free. Ron, quickly tell everyone, not quickly, but I'm saying tell them where they can find all your work at Wager Talk with Vegas Chris podcast, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Thank you. Thank you once again for having me. Always great to close the week with you. I know it's Friday. Everybody's busy. They want to get out to the weekend. So whenever they watch the show, thanks for watching. Monday, college article. It varies I pick a different topic all the time on Wager Talk. Tuesday, NFL article. It varies all the time. That was trade deadline talk this past Tuesday. Tuesday with Las Vegas Chris. We're on the air brainstorming and testing each other, and who knows what comes out of it. Sometimes we're actually making wagers online after we talk to each other. And just before this show, joined by Ted and Chris and myself, and we go over topics of the day. We test each other again. We bring up some interesting points, and we close right here where I get to talk NCAA with you.
Always my favorite spot of the week. So shout out again. Go over to Twitter at Ron A Sports. Follow him. He does follow back. He does answer questions. He even multitasks as he's trying to do an unscripted show, answers questions and types them in perfectly. So from myself, Jeff Dawson at EC Sports Invest, the one and only Mr. Ron at Ron A Sports. We wish everyone a blessed day and evening. The weekend is here. Have some fun, cash some tickets, and we will catch everyone here next